Tinashe Mparapata, and Jan Zhou. Today we're looking at the Surplus Trust Policy Dialogue is looking at the state of the economy in Zimbabwe, unpacking the drivers of the crisis and the possible political consequences. We did not think there would have been the dramatic happenings of last Friday, namely the devaluation, when we planned this session last week, Wednesday. But so things happened so quickly, and in many respects, our analysts here would have anticipated the demise of the ZIG. But as the title of this session indicates, we're going beyond dealing with the symptoms of a much more fundamental problem. And we are hoping that our experts, and indeed they are experts, not only experts, but they've been regular commentators on the Zimbabwean scene for a long time. They've been very engaging in a variety of fora. They have provoked the powers that be on a number of occasions. But in many respects, Mugano and Tinashe have been borne out, especially with respect to the local currency. So today, we want to look at the context discussion, namely the immediate demise of the ZIG last Friday and the devaluation thereof. Secondly, we want to analyze the fundamental causes of the economic crisis in Zimbabwe, of which the currency issue is a symptom. Because the broader question coming from laypersons would be, why is it only in Zimbabwe that we have this kind of economic crisis, this kind of currency instability? Those of us who travel in the region, we know we hardly see a US dollar in Zambia, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, not to mention South Africa and the Rand area. What is it that makes us so peculiar? We want us to understand the background to all this. And if, as has happened, we've at least 4 currencies collapse over the last few years, why does the government keep trying to reinvent the wheel? And if the demise of the local currency has been inevitable and as fragile as the previous ones, what then has been the rationale or even the hidden agenda, if any, for such a failed exercises, which have always ended in tears and at cost to the ordinary citizen? Specifically, what informed the introduction of the ZIG in April amid such pomp and fanfare? And what have been the immediate causes of its demise? Who has gained from this fiasco, and who are the losers? And lastly, we have to consider the political implications. For some of us, for many of us, if the priorities are not right, nothing can be right. And therefore, there's the need for a comprehensive political settlement in Zimbabwe appears to us to be the only solution through which the Zimbabwe economy can be revived and confidence built, and indeed a better economic regime on the back of political leadership which is more literate, more affair with the issues economic than has proved to be the case in Zimbabwe over the last decades. So, I start with Professor Gift Mugano, Professor of Economics, eminent economist in our midst. Gift, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Mandaza. It's an honor and an opportunity to be here to talk to colleagues about the state of the economy in Zimbabwe. And also, I like the background which is provided to say what are the major drivers of this challenge? How did we get to where we are? And you are raising a very interesting question when you say in other regions, they have their own currency. Why do we have our own currency? Why are we using US dollars? When I was in Botswana in June, I was tempted to take a photo of a poster in a bureau de change, which was put in 2009, which was showing the denomination of various notes, Namibian notes. I admired it because it has remained like that. Yet, in our case, between 2009 and now, we've lost almost 6 currencies. And then you say, what's going on in Jerusalem? So I want to start to where we are, then go backwards to say what is driving this crisis. And you are right to say where we stand today in terms of currency crisis is a symptom of an underlying problem. So let me unpack the symptom today, where we stand today, then I'll go back. So we were taken by surprise, all of us, not predicted that government through the Reserve Bank was going to devalue the Zimbabwe gold. We've seen businesses accounting their losses. Imagine if you were selling at 14 ZiG against $1 and within an hour or so, you are now being told that your rate is at close to 25 ZiG against $1. So clearly, you've lost almost half of your cash flow. Likewise, workers were getting their salaries now. They were paid. They're now kind of getting half ZiG in terms of equivalent. The ZiG has collapsed literally. We are now dealing with the pieces of the ZiG right now. It has collapsed. It has failed to hold back. All right. And you know, at one point in time when this forum, when ZiG was launched, and I made a prediction that in 6 months, the ZiG will collapse. And we received several attacks from the powers that be. So we don't have much to talk about with the ZiG right now. As far as I'm concerned, when a currency fails to take off, that's it. There's no going to be any miracle from government which they're going to use, or any magic they're going to use to drum it back, to bring it back to the people. You noticed that at the beginning when the ZiG was launched, it was backed by music, jingles, it was backed by police, it was backed by financial intelligence unit to try to anger it. And now, they can't use those police, they can't use financial intelligence units, they cannot use the music. ZiG music is not going to work anymore because the ZiG has shown its colors. That is, it's not going to work just like previous currencies. Why is this happening? Before I even go there, I want to say, why did they introduce the ZiG? In my view, my suspicion, I don't think there was something spectacular in the ZiG in terms of introducing it. I think it was a way to try to work in a psychological way, people's psychology, to cut the zeros, because the zeros were surely cut by 2,500 units. So in actual sense, our bank balances were divided by 2,500 units to give us the balances in the ZiG. So it was kind of managing expectations, managing people's psychological traits, that we are now dealing with small numbers. Then we were told that it is backed by gold. We then have a structured currency, which was never to be. Because if it was a really structured currency, there was supposed to be fungibility or convertibility of the gold and the US dollars whenever a legitimate request for foreign currency was made by business when they're presenting foreign invoice, and it never worked. So it was never a structured currency in my view. It's on paper, but practically it never worked. So the idea was to kind of work on people's psychology and try to bring confidence and say, we now have our currency is backed by gold. So it was never big because gold prices are going up. Last time I checked, I think gold prices now around $2,600. When we introduced the ZIG, just close to 2,000, we were not even at 2,000. I think it was 1,800, somewhere there, 1,900. So you can see that there's no correlation between the performance of gold and our currency. In actual sense, our exchange rate was supposed to be strengthening. Right. So why are we here? So I will briefly go back and look at 1997, 14 November. I will not stay much in history, but I just want to give the context to provide my argument from an informed position. In November 1997, the then President R.G. Mugabe, and may he so rest in peace, gave a directive to the Minister of Finance to pay war veterans 4.2 billion Zimbabwean dollars. So that was a political decision. And that then became a money printing factor, again in the same package. So within 24 hours, the Zimbabwean dollar lost value by almost 80%. Just before that directive, the exchange rate was 10 Zimbabwean dollars against $1 US. And within 24 hours, it went to 1:18. So you see, we have immediately, that's when we begin to have a challenge of currency crisis. Our rate collapsed within, that was called the Black Friday. And next month, November 14, we'll be celebrating 27 years after Black Friday. And since then, we have not come out of currency crisis. We are still stuck. Because from there, we begin to have challenges with our currency. Now, the important event again to note was 1998, where we made a decision to go into DRC war, and we're funding a regional war. And again, we spend a lot of foreign currency, we're draining foreign currency. Again, against a situation where we had excessive money in the market and we are draining foreign currency. 1999, MDC was formed, and again with a political crisis because Namibia were taken by surprise. And from that time up to now, we have seen the government of Zimbabwe attacking the opposition. We have seen unprecedented levels of human rights abuse, which have given us a brand equity, which is very bad. So what Professor Mandaza was saying, that we need a political solution. We need the politics and economics are two different sides of the same coin. If our politics is bad, the economy won't work. So we end sanctions. We got sanctions because of human rights abuse. That was early 2000. And sanctions are not a good thing for the economy because it becomes kind of international commission of oath in terms of current countries' stability or a good destination for investment. So once you have sanctions, it is termed as a bad destination for investment. So it affects movement for investment. And from that time, our investment fell from 25% of GDP, highest in 1996, to 1.1% of GDP. That's the level of investment which we are getting. Again, in 2000, we had a chaotic land reform, which could have been organized if government had made a decision to tax the land, because they were going to be able to move into the farms in a non-chaotic manner. So we disrupted production, value chains. And so we have a challenge now from 2000 to date of production. And that is the challenge we have. So even when the ZIG was introduced, one of the things which we raised as the real challenges which are affecting sustainability and the performance of ZIG is production. I always argued the best way to defend the currency is to defend it with the production. Even if you put gold in there, you saw that the tonnages which were told by government that there's 2.5 tons of gold is a symptom of lack of production. We are endowed with gold, but when we look at the internet, we see other countries, UK, Portugal, America, they have tons and tons of gold, but some of these countries do not have a gold mine. But we have gold mines, but we don't have enough tons because one, we don't have enough production. Number two, in instance where we have production with corruption, massive corruption. The study which was done, I think, by Zimcot shows that every year we lose 1.8 billion US dollars in terms of illicit financial flows. And I think also documentary by Al Jazeera says it all. Even Parliament of Zimbabwe endorsed that report that we are losing 1.8 billion US dollars illicit financial flows. So we don't have enough production, but where we have production which is not enough, we even lose it through corruption. Those are the evils which are attacking our economic stability. So it's not in the name of the asset which you are backing our currency. It's in the quantity of that asset. So a politician would want to go to town and say, gold has been there since immemorial. It is true. But how much do we have in the central bank? That's the issue. And that is the challenge which we have. That's why I was very clear at the beginning that the amount of gold in the central bank and also foreign currency which is available, which was backing the currency, was 11 days of import cover. We need enough reserves which are covering 6 months. And this is an issue where colleagues from the other side of politics have been arguing that we are dollarized. But remember, we have another challenge, which is called confidence. So if you have no confidence, you need to have foreign currency in abundance to guarantee that whenever one wants to pay a foreign invoice, it must be available. So you can't then match the amount of reserve money, right, and the amount of gold in foreign currency. And you think that you are dealing with South Africans who have not seen, we have never gone through what they've gone through. That's where we are missing it. We are using too much mathematics. So we have a drought of confidence. And a drought of confidence becomes worse when the government is indicating to the left and is turning to the right. As in instance of where the central bank governor has been saying many things when he introduced the currency. It was brought by a World Bank. It's not our idea. So how do you implement something which is not your idea? He said there's enough foreign currency. If you want foreign currency, go to the bank. People go to the bank, they can get foreign currency. He says that the rate is not being controlled. Now we are told that the rate has been devalued. When you devalue, it means you are moving the exchange rate from point A to point B, from 13.56 to 25. You are moving. So we don't know when are they going to move again. And when they have moved this rate, people have lost their money. But if the rate was depreciating, it means it's moving on its own based on market forces. And even yesterday, I heard the president saying that the Reserve Bank had to allow flexibility of the exchange rate. But it doesn't have to be allowed by the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank, once they say it's a free market, the markets must then act in an invisible hand, as we were taught by Adam Smith. So that is the challenge we have. So there's no confidence in this country. And getting confidence and trust in government is not a walk in the park. And unfortunately, the ZPF government would want to earn confidence through propaganda by telling us that this is backed, by telling us that we have 600,000 tons of wheat, by telling us that we don't have budget deficit. We've seen it in July when the Minister of Finance did a presentation of his midterm review. Clearly, anyone who is coming from business knows that whenever the assumptions which you set when you are setting your budget, if they change, there's no way you can keep the same budget. You have to adjust it. So the Minister of Finance, in his assumptions for the budget for 2024, he was expecting a stable exchange rate. And at the point when he presented his budget, the official exchange rate was around 5,400 Zimbabwean dollars against $1 US. And his budget was $57 trillion, which means effectively he was talking about a budget of close to $9 billion US equivalent. And he was expecting it to be stable exchange rate. And unfortunately, by 5 of April 2024, the official exchange rate had gone to $33,882.72. So it has moved by almost 7 times. So effectively, the budget was reduced from a real value of $9 billion to $1.6 billion. So there's no way he was going to avoid a supplemental budget. In any way, there was also a drought, which is also becoming a real issue. So again, he was supposed to do a supplemental budget. So for him to say he was not going to have a supplemental budget, when it was clear even in his budget that the Minister of Transport had overspent his budget by over 200% mid-year. Minister of Finance was close to 90% utilization of their budget mid-year. Minister of Defense also had gone above 50%. President's office, I think, was above 80%. So what does it mean? Where are they going to get their additional resources for the remaining 6 months of the year? And these ministries which had been staffed when he was busy overspending in other lines, how are they going to meet their activities in the course of the year? So that is a scheme they are using to lie to us. But year in, year out, we see them going for condonation. So people are not stupid. Zimbabweans have been cheated almost 6 times now, as far as our currency crisis is concerned. We've changed currency over 6 times. So they are now smarter. So the other challenge which is driving us to be where we are is the informal sector. The informal sector has become like what I call the hyenas of the economy, which are very destructive because it becomes a ready market where it's a jungle's kingdom. It uses its own informal rules. It doesn't listen to policy instruments, statutory instruments, and policy directive. And it's very difficult to police. And that is a challenge for the economy because it's a ready market. That's why you see that the supermarkets are closing. You've seen Pick and Pay is closing. You've seen Food World is closed, the branches. You've seen the retail outlets for clothing closing as well. It's because the informal sector is highly competitive and they don't pay taxes. They have no compliance cost and they don't have any challenges to do with the government. They have their own bank called the Matrix Bank. They don't care about what happens in central bank. So this is the challenge which we have. An informal sector is a cancer. And the only way to kill the informal sector is to create jobs in the formal sector. The only way to create jobs in the formal sector is to bring investments into the formal sector. The only way to bring investment in the formal sector is to make our politics right. So you've seen how we have failed in politics. Our politics, in as far as our elections are concerned, is always disputed. Not for fun, but for reality. The evidence is there. SADC confirmed it. Let's forget about our disagreements. That these elections were shameful. And they've actually endorsed the report in the SADC summit. So it's now an official document in as far as our elections are concerned. So the challenge now I want to pose to ZANU-PF is that how do they think ZANU-PF can run this country alone when it is divided between the opposition with the millions of voters and also as ZANU-PF they also have their millions of voters. But there's no way this country can move forward when people are divided. And you can see it the way our body language, our body politics, our discussion on social media, everywhere. There's no mercy. The Twitter space, the X space is these are rough streets. They slaughter people's emotions there. People are not kind. Gone are the days when the Zimbabwe would use the national broadcaster. So the nature of toxicity in the country has to be watered down. It's destructive. And the danger which the ZANU-PF government will not see is the level of education. You don't toe the line for people who are educated. They will tell you that go to hell. They run their life using informal rules. And the government has got a difficulty now of managing 20% of the formal sector and directing policy. It's not possible. So even if ZIG was a good currency, it was still going to fail on the back of politics and lack of confidence. So we need the national cohesion if we're going to find a way forward as far as this currency is concerned. And unfortunately, yesterday when I was watching the video on the presentation by His Excellence, I'm trying to round up now on the state of the economy, the SONA. Yes, to me, it was disaster because purely there was nothing. There were mere notes which were given to the president. And I don't know what are the technocrats in government doing. There was a recognition of the challenges on the ground by the president. There were no solutions. Nothing. No solutions. When the president comes to present State of the Nation address, you expect him as the first citizen to come with a joker. Those who know cards, that this is the joker because he's coming in the midst of the storm. But only to be told that he is actually agreeing and condoning that the devaluation was to allow flexibility. So what's going to happen next? When are they going to devalue again and we lose our income? What's going to happen to electricity, which we are told that the Kariba dam is not working properly? So what's going to happen? I do not see it in the State of the Nation address. I do not see what's going to happen to the $4 billion US, which we're importing, which could be domesticated. I do not see measures government is taking to domesticate those imports, those tissue and paper, which is almost $200 million, which are importing, the chewing gums, the pampers, fruit and vegetables. Imagine, this does not require artificial intelligence. It's purely traditional farming, right? Cereals, which is take over $500 million every year, which you are importing. So I do not see those things coming up. It was dead silent. Yet we want our currency to be strong. How do you make your currency strong when you have massive drainage of foreign currency in the form of commodities, which you can substitute through a local content act, through a local content policy, through local content regulations, where you stipulate what must be produced locally, and you provide incentives and the right institutional support to do that. It was not there. It was dead silent. We did not hear how he's going to take care of almost half of the population, which is in extreme poverty. Extreme, not poverty, but in extreme poverty. It was dead silence. We did not also hear what is going to do with the informal sector, which is where 80% of jobs now are in the informal sector. So it was just one of those days where one would think that there was much discussion about agriculture, where one would think that maybe he was talking at the agricultural show. So that's the challenge which we have. So we are going nowhere. And I want to talk about 1 minute about political crisis. When you have currency failure, there are 3 F's which create a political crisis in economics. The first one is food. The second one is fuel. The third one is forex. And I can put forex also as a proxy for currency. So where there's no food, there's a political crisis. Where there's no fuel, at least with fuel, we're covered. But as long as any of those F's is not sufficient in good standing, you have a political crisis. So if you look at 33 countries which had faced dollarization, again, you see that there were difficulties of the same government to pay workers. And that's where we are going. We are going to see government failing to pay workers. Now it's even more difficult because there's devaluation. So the Ministry of Finance is going to adjust the salaries of workers, which means it's going to cause inflation, and the workers will come back again, and his money will be useless. And you'll get to a point whereby his taxes are also not going to be sufficient. Why? Because of the informal sector, which has been growing. We've seen the 2% tax now contributing 3.1% of total revenue from 16%. We have seen corporate tax contributing about 9% of total tax from 15.5%. So these are the major instruments of taxes which can be used to give you a dipstick of the challenge where we are going. Why are we having 2% tax going down in terms of contribution to revenue? Because of the cash. The formal sector does not use the cash. And now because the ZIG has collapsed, there's going to be more cash transaction. And the government will be broke. And they will have to look for dialogue. And without that, and I've seen Mugabe had no choice. 2009, and this is my last point, Mugabe was forced to go into dialogue, not because he wanted, because they have current crisis. I'll rest my case here, and I'll be happy to take questions. Over to you, Professor Mandaza.
Before you go, Gift, just a few points for clarification. The first, can you summarize who are the drivers of the crisis? The main driver of the crisis. You mentioned the informal sector, the hyenas, the mattress bank, but you said very little in terms of the state actors, in terms of the competence or lack thereof. Would you include the state actors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. So before I answer the state actors, the drivers of this crisis is politics, is corruption, it's the lack of production, it's the lack of confidence, it's the informal sector which is growing large. It is now the policy matrix of our country and the state actors, the technocrats, they are biggest letdown for this country. So if you look at central bank, for example, central bank, I will look at two issues around central bank. The first one, they have actually killed the ZIG by themselves. Clearly because of their deliberate decision not to release the ZIG denominations up to $200. They made the ZIG a currency of change, to be used for change, by providing smaller denomination, which is ending up at around 20 ZIG. So by that act, they've sabotaged the ZIG. The owner of the ZIG sabotaged the ZIG. And again, in the same manner, how they also sabotaged the ZIG at the point of introduction. Have you ever seen it in our history, Professor Mandaza, when a currency is launched today and you take 1 month to release the money? In the meantime, what are you telling people? You are telling them that you use US dollars, right? That's what you're telling them. So when you then introduce the money later on, people have already a solution. And are you aware that that token which was produced by the Windies, the conductor, the card box, is more valuable than the ZIG? Why? Because it is written 50 cents, and that 50 cents does not change. And they cannot be arrested in unity when they write 50 cents. But when they refuse to take 7 ZIG as 50 cents, they are arrested. So the card box is with more value. But how did the card box come into play? It came into play because there was no change. So the informal sector, through their mattress bank, they also produced a token, which then became more valuable. And then the ZIG was no longer accepted even in the converse because the card box is already there, and it does not depreciate. And when you give your card box, when you get the card box, you're going to work. When you come back, you pay it back. It's accepted. It's acceptable. It is central bank. Then the second side of central bank, where they failed and sabotaged the ZIG, is in the manner they understand the economy. Central bank thinks that they can solve these challenges in this country. We have structural challenges, which requires structural policies. That is your industrial policy and its specific policy instruments, which comes under industrial policy, like your local content policy, value chain strategies, and special economic zones, things like that. You need, again, agricultural policies. You need trade policies. You need an energy master plan. These are the mixture, the value addition and the beneficiation plan, which can help us to add value than exporting 92% of our exports as raw materials. 92% of total exports are raw materials. 70% being minerals and 22% being agricultural commodities. So, but central bank stand as a Minister of Finance as if they are the alpha and omega of this economic crisis. They can solve it. So they have sabotaged the ZIG in that manner. And also look at the Minister of Finance, it's my last point, how they've killed the ZIG. Reserve Bank is pursuing a contractory policy, a tightening stance. Then the Minister of Finance is pursuing an expansionary policy. It's like putting poison on a sick patient because they are putting excessive liquidity in the market through payment of construction work in cash. At the same time, central bank is trying to be tightening. So what is being tightened by central bank is loosened by Minister of Finance through excess liquidity. They have played a critical role. That's why I took you back to 14 November 1997. It was Treasury which was putting money in the market. And we have continued on that path. We see command agriculture, we see Fumvudza, we see roads, we see dams being constructed. Now, where are we going in 20 seconds? If ZIG crashed in September, before farming season, right? Before bonuses, before last-minute payment of contractors by government, before we enter into fourth quarter of the year, where foreign currency receipts are now going down, and we are entering also first quarter of 2025, where the foreign currency receipts are also down. What is the future of this ZIG? It will be tissue when we reach this Christmas. I rest my case.
Thanks, Pete. Now, just last question. To what extent did the pre-SADC summit construction work and the cost thereof contribute to this demise of the ZIG, not to mention the impending budget deficit, which, as you said, as you hinted, is quite massive. From what I read, was 250 million in July and 199 million. Is it million or billion? 199 million in August. These are deficits. So, does this pre-summit construction work, which I believe is nearly $250 million, which has not been paid yet, by the way, because the contractors were asked to pay to do the work on the back of part payment for the Bight Bridge road construction. And as you know, 2 weeks ago, they've packed. They've down tools. So we have a crisis in the construction sector as well. So does this in any way add to the deficit? You mentioned the Minister of Transport budget overrun of 200%. And I come back to the same point which I raised earlier on. Do we have technocrats in government, or just a bunch of clerks, especially in the economic ministries? I ask this question because I was also in government one time. We have always suffered from a level of economic illiteracy, but I've never seen it as bad as it is now. You know, what's going on?
Okay. Yeah. So to a large extent, the infrastructure development program has been a major destabilizing factor on our currency, on our economy. Because we have done the unthinkable. We are the only country which is funding infrastructure using cash, like we are buying bread. Yet we should use infrastructure bonds. We should use diaspora bonds. We should use public-private partnerships. You can't just pump money in the market to fund infrastructure. And because you have seen how much money has been spent on SADC, as you are saying, it's a major factor which is still going to bite us. So one of the reasons why I predicted that the ZIG is going to crash in September in 6 months. It was not prophetic, it was logical. And when people were attacking me, the likes of Comrade Mchangwa and even technocratic government, my brother George Jaramba, I knew what I was saying. I knew that after SADC, they will begin to pay. So I was just reading, and I knew that the thinking of government, I was reading their thinking, that before SADC, they would want to impress SADC that the ZIG is working. We are a legitimate government. We have been accepted by markets, by financial markets, and the testament that we have a currency which is working. And the only way to do that was to suppress payment. So I knew that after that, they will release the lead because SADC would have been gone. So this is the genesis of the demise. We have not seen enough of ZIG. But that is not end on SADC. You've seen how much they put on cars for the chiefs, which was not budgeted for. So there are a number of budget lines which might seem small, but when you add them in one area and another, they're quite significant. At the beginning, in this program, I mentioned that I'm expecting that by the end of the year, our budget deficit should be around $2 billion. That was my estimation. And I was right. We are getting there. And it is seemed to be like it's always a situation. Because every year, we have seen our national debt increasing. Just within a year, our debt increased by almost $3 billion. Public debt. It's now 21 billion. Last year, it was 18 billion. So you can see how we have failed to manage our finances. Are you aware, Professor Mandaza, that when this dispensation came, and after the coup, our public debt was 10 billion. Hallelujah. Now, in 6 months, we are at 21 billion. What does it tell you? It tells you that we have a government which is wasteful, which has no technocratic thinking. Now, your last question about, do we have a technocrats in government? I believe that even the professor, Minister of Finance, is a technocrat. But one person asked me on X this week that if you are given a position to join government, would you accept? I said no, I won't accept. And did we score? So government, we have a sense of it. Because do you think, Professor Manda, my question is then around up, that there's wisdom, is there any wisdom to ban lending, like what happened in 2022 in May? If they are technocrats, no one in these races would do that. Do you think there's someone who would say the ZIG is very strong, and after just from nowhere, you devalue it by over 44%, and people lose their money? Is there anyone who is reasoning? So there's a whipping system, which the ZANU-PF government has been doing at Sheikh House. They took it to parliament, whipping people to say, this is what you do. Now, I'm afraid that they are taking it to wrong areas, which could be central bank, which could be Minister of Finance. Because there's no way Minister of Finance, Professor Mutulu, would just do this nonsense, where we lose money. And even this governor is breaking history. In the 6 months, he's lost his currency. Mangoji was even better. He struggled with the economy, but 6 months, he lost it. So what is he going to be doing in the next 5 years? So one way is Sana, but the people there have got good CVs. I know some of them, but they can't use it because they want their whipping system. And as long as the Zambia government want to use a whipping system, like what you see our brothers from government does to us on Twitter, they want you to shut up. If they want you to shut up, I'm not a civil servant. I'm just an ordinary Zimbabwean who has got the constitutional right to talk. What about a civil servant? You can't even talk. I think you can't talk. I rest my case.
Yeah, I'll come back to you because we have to take into account what you just said. We have 11 days of import cover instead of 6 months. We have a budget deficit of 2 billion by end of this year. A public debt of 21 billion. Deficits are growing, and really, there's the question, of course, which I want you to consider at the end is who specifically. We want to know who. I mean, we in government, we knew who would be responsible for particular actions, particular decisions. And you mentioned that made the point that Mnangagwa simply read a statement prepared for him, which was completely vacuous in terms of dealing with the crisis. So who is behind the scenes? Who's doing this? Who's working behind the scenes? Maybe Tinashe, can you come in now and help us? We want to know who are the prophets of doom or the technicians of doom in the government, in the state. Who are the state actors? Can we pinpoint them?
Okay.
Among the many of them who are
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah.
This is an important dialogue that you've convened here. And to answer directly your question, maybe that's where we should have started, which, I don't understand why government, especially the central bank and treasury, are not involved in these sort of discussions. And the discussion is pretty simple and straightforward. What went wrong? We can all admit that in the last 6 months, the devaluation in itself, in its essence, is indicative of something that went wrong. So, and massively went wrong in a massive way. So the question that we must ask is, what really went wrong? So I thank you very much for giving us this platform for us to do a reconnaissance and to really dig deep and say what went wrong. Are there any lessons that we can learn? And what will the future look like? And I like that you posed this question to me specifically because I think that's the remit that you gave me, and I would like to get into that, the technical bit, because I think Professor Mgano has done a fantastic job focusing on policy and the politicians. But I'd like to take just to veer a little differently and say that I think that while the politicians are ignorant by their nature, I think they take a lot of advice from certain people. And unfortunately, this advice from these people is extremely bad advice. So the government is working on, or at least politicians are working on the pretext that the money is there. So someone far away from Zimbabwe asked me a very pertinent and very innocent question. And they asked me, if the devaluation is happening at 44% after 5 months, where were the technocrats and what was being said in the last 5 months? Didn't they know that there was a problem? And, I blubbered and tried to convince him otherwise. But the more and more I blubbered, the more and more I realized what he was trying to say. What he really and essentially was trying to say is that for the last 5 months, all we heard, especially from the technocrats and from the Herald and everywhere, was that there was stability. We even had international organizations parroting the same idea of stability. So, why would the president think any different? Why would the politicians think any different? If the idea of stability after 5 months, there was this idea of stability, and people who consider themselves technical beyond just the civil servants within central bank and treasury, continue to push this idea that there was stability. And we all knew there was no stability. I actually think that the politicians reacted in a manner that we were not expecting, primarily because they reacted to the shops and the prices within the shops and empty shelves. So naturally, politicians react to what they see. Now, unfortunately, they reacted to a wound or chironda changa chakunua. And that's the problem, that the wound um, was, it was really bad. And if you think about it, if the wound was really bad, who is to blame? Is it the passerby who just sees that, you know what, this wound is not healing, it's really bad? Or it's the doctor who continuously told the patient that they were stable? On what basis do they consider this stability? And I just want to get into the technical bit. And the reason why I want to get into the technical bit, and sorry, Prof, if I get too technical, but I think that it's necessary for us to get technical to go beyond the rhetoric so that people can understand for themselves that ZIG was bound to fail, not because of the way it was structured, but because there was total economic illiteracy or incompetence by the people who, first of all, proposed structured currency, and second of all, thought it was structured in the manner that they did. A very simple thing. Let's talk about reserves. Did we have enough reserves? Prof. Mugano would know. Simple, straightforward economics, O level, A level economics, would have said we had inadequate reserves for a structured currency that promised fungibility, and fungibility meaning the turning of Zim dollar or whatever was held in Zim dollar, you could easily turn it into US dollars or into gold. Any anyone anyone who's done elementary economics would have said, no, that's not possible. Our reserves, as proffered by the central bank, were 285 million. But the total amount of money supply at the time when it was launched, when we look at the previous Zim dollar that was there, was way above that. So the question is, why did the central bank, why did the president take this advice from his technical experts who lied to central bank, who lied to to the government of the day, to cabinet, that we had adequate reserves? On what basis did they argue that we had adequate reserves? Now, to the common man, let me simplify for you that we didn't have adequate reserves. What they did is they looked at what they termed reserve money. And reserve money is money, notes and coins, plus money lodged at the central bank. And that's all they considered to be money. And everything else, whatever banks lend, they didn't consider it as part of the structured currency. Now, that's a technical bit that I don't expect the president to understand. But the question that everyone must ask is, who told them that those reserves covered reserve money and that was good enough? Now, when you go into a supermarket and you use your bank card and you swipe your ZIG, the supermarket does not determine that this is reserve money and this is credit money or this is government I owe you. They don't care. As far as they're concerned, it's money and it is transacted. Now, if the central bank is promising that anyone who brings money to the central bank, they were going to convert it into gold or into US dollars, they were not differentiating whether it was credit money, whether it was a government I owe you, or it was real ZIG money. There was no differentiation. So why did the central bank insist on reserve money as the basis of structured currency? This is an important question that I'm hoping, and here I'm on the side of the politicians. Here I'm on the side, I do not expect the central bank governor, John Chayabano, to have a full appreciation of this. But I expect him to ask the question, who the heck told him that we had enough reserves, that he could launch a structured currency based on the reserves that were there? I think that the president must ask the same question. Who told them that it was enough? And I think that's where the economic literacy and incompetence comes in. So that's the first question that I think needs answers. The second technical question to ask is this: if indeed this was a structure, purely reserve money that we were covering, why would interest rates be similar to US dollar interest rates? So remember, interest rates actually moved from 150 to 70 something percent and then crashed to 20%. Now, if today, 6 months later, we're told that there's a speculative bubble, the question to ask is, why then did you reduce interest rates on ZIG? On what basis did you do so? I don't expect the president of the country to understand that. And whoever told them that it was important to reduce interest rate to similar interest rate as US dollars for ZIG, I think they are economically illiterate and incompetent. They should not be anywhere near government advice or advisory services of any kind. Because why would you do that? A more cautious approach would have been, let's keep interest rates wherever they are. Let's make sure that there is no speculative binge. And if after a year we think that things are okay and there is use of ZIG, then maybe we can start reducing the, the interest rate. There's this thing called velocity of money. We didn't know because it was a currency, a new currency being introduced. We had no idea what that velocity of money would look like. Anyone who's traveled outside of Zimbabwe would know that usually when a waiter comes, they would ask, is this a checking account or is this a savings account? You must ask yourself, why do they ask this question when central bank can get this information from the banks? But I think that this is the information that they need for their own real-time understanding of what are people spending. Are they spending credit or they're spending their savings? And if they're spending their credit, how many times are they spending this credit? How much of this credit is moving within the economy at one go? This is what an economist is supposed to understand. And anyone in central bank, now I take it maybe the policymaker had a view and he was, you know, uh, imposing his view on the technical guys. But the technical guys would have said, we know the velocity of money of US dollars. You're launching a currency whose velocity of money, of circulation, we have no idea about. The better place is for us to be cautious. So that's the second bit where the technical guys failed and failed miserably. The third bit where the technical guys have failed and failed miserably is actually with Treasury. Treasury will insist. So let's take June numbers, which Professor Mgano has looked at already. The budget deficit was 13%. This is what they admitted to. But I think, and I think you've already put numbers, that the budget deficit was way higher than that. The problem comes because there are a lot of parallel structures where we don't know how much we actually owe, how much government actually owes. That's number one. Number two, government has stopped issuing TDs. They sort of it's a gentleman's agreement, or it's a letter that they write where they acknowledge their debt, but it's not instruments that come onto the market so that as economists we can determine the level of how much the government actually owes. Today, whatever you see in the budget, I can guarantee you this, that number is wrong. We don't know what that number is. Now, to be fair, Maybe Treasury knows, and it's a number that they keep secret. But governments around the world, the number one thing that they do is they come onto the market, onto the open market, because they want the markets to know exactly what is going on. If they're borrowing more than they should, we need to know this. And that's why you use open market instruments rather than to tell a supplier that, yes, I owe you and I will pay you one day, but the market doesn't know. You leave the market to then speculate because naturally that's what you do. And that is why, and this is the particular reason why every time there's a payment to a contractor, government can't understand why a payment to a contractor suddenly leads to a run on a currency. Well, the reason why there's a run on a currency is because people, in people's minds, they think that that is direct printing. Now, to be fair, maybe it's not. But how do we know? No information is shared at all. And any economist with their salt would have explained this to Treasury, would have explained that no one knows how much you actually owe these contractors. So the basic understanding is if you pay these contractors, then yes, the rate must move. How much do we actually owe? And we need real-time numbers, not numbers that we then get 6 months or a year or 3 years as far as the condonation bill is concerned. That's when we know that, oh, actually we owed someone. And we've had experiences with Command Agriculture where we don't know the numbers until it's already too late. Then the third thing that I want, or the final thing that I want us to focus on, which is technical, is to understand the idiosyncrasies of Zimbabwean state, Zimbabwean monetary system. If you go to Germany, 60% of their money is cash. If you go into a bar in Germany, you will most likely use cash because that's what the barman requires. Why? And it's very different when you go to France. When you go to France, you could even give your barman a check, a post-dated check that's 6 months later. Why? Well, France didn't suffer hyperinflation and Germany suffered hyperinflation. So it's obvious for any technical person to first argue with anyone with in politics or with a policy mandate to explain to them that Zimbabwe suffers from hyperinflationary trauma. If Germany, after 100 years, still has that trauma where they want to see the physical cash for someone to actually believe that there's a transaction happening, it means trauma lives through decades, sometimes through centuries. There are laws that the Germans have put in place to ensure that anyone who prints money can go to jail. We have a Reserve Bank Act that stipulates that government can utilize their overdraft, which means they can print up to 20% of a previous year's budget, and is perfectly legal. That's something that's unique to Zimbabwe. And I say all these things, these four issues, they've got nothing to do with the politics. And I'm not saying that there's anything good about the politics, but the remit that you've given me is more technical. And I'm saying that technically Zig failed because from day one it was a bad currency and it was bad advice and it was badly structured. And governments today, whether it's central bank or treasury, should ask themselves what went wrong. And if they don't have this sort of reconnaissance, then I guarantee that it's going to continuously repeat itself. That's my submission, Prof. I don't know if there are any questions
I have a
or you
question,
need
yes. I have
clarification
a
of any
question.
sort.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
We have done a fantastic job on the audit of technocracy in the state of Zimbabwe. If you are asked to do not just an audit, but also proposals and recommendations for the reform of the technical side of government, particularly the economic ministries, treasury, and the central bank, what would be your proposals? Prima facie,
Okay.
give me unbridled recommendations. because we don't want to end up here in this discussion as just talking. We want to emerge from this with some suggestions as to how to improve the space in which we are operating.
All right. So the first thing, it's a very good question. The first thing is I would assume no bad actors, that the policymaker is a good actor. So you can take that assumption for what it's worth. But if I assume that they're good actors, then the first thing that I would do is I would separate, I would set up an independent body that really measures money supply in Zimbabwe. We don't know what we're measuring as far as money supply is concerned. And we only get the numbers 3 months later or 4 months later, and we're trying to make sense of it. Not too many people read through those numbers, but we read through those numbers and it doesn't make sense. And a lot of nuances are missed. So I would have a separate body that collects independent, maybe within Zimstat, but I think Zimstat comes
A currency
under.
board. A currency board.
So a currency board is more on the monetary side, but the first thing that we need to do is just purely measuring money supply, saying this is the money supply in Zimbabwe. Using the World Bank, the way the World Bank utilizes money supply numbers in Zimbabwe, unfortunately, it has a limitation in Zimbabwe because Zimbabwe has suffered hyperinflation. So things like velocity of money, things like how much does the government actually owe, but not doing it from treasury perspective, but going into the particular line ministry. How much does the agriculture ministry actually owe? How much does AZIM actually owe? All those numbers must feed into what our money supply is. Because if we don't know what the money supply is, we just print with abandon. And I think that's part of the problem. So the first thing is assuming good actors and then measuring properly. Because when we measure properly, you will find that we are not going to print as much because we've got good actors. Now, I'm going to look at good actors. Now, the issue with assuming good actors, we now know that they're bad actors. That's where the currency board comes from. The currency board says whether you're a good or bad actor, unfortunately, the Zimbabwean consumer doesn't believe in you anymore. They don't trust you. So, are you not better off piggybacking on someone else who is already trusted? For example, when you look at the South African Reserve Bank, it's already trusted. You've seen how they've reacted to the rand and how their policy structure around the rand. It's someone who's already trusted. So if you have reserves, if you indeed have reserves, why don't you place these reserves with the South African Reserve Bank? Do you know the sort of confidence that the market will have if the South African Reserve Bank actually says these are the reserves that Zimbabwe has? That's number one. Number two, anyone who has ZIG and presents his ZIG, it's not the central bank of Zimbabwe that will back it up. It's actually the central bank of South Africa that will vouch for it, which is nothing new. Uh, Prof, you would remember this, that within the pre-independence era, between 1974 to 1981, we had a South African central bank governor. Why do you think that South African was in Zimbabwe? That South African was in Zimbabwe because South Africa didn't trust Rhodesia, that Rhodesia would not print. They knew that something would happen, something was amiss. So they had their own men within the central bank, ensuring that what was there, the ledgers were balancing. It's a technical problem that we have. And I'm assuming, remember what I said, the remit that you gave me is with, outside of politics. The politics, I think Prof. Mugano has done a fantastic job as far as that's concerned. But here I'm assuming people who want Zim currency to work. If they want it to work, we need to correctly measure money supply. I believe that we're not measuring it properly. And then the second thing is we need to have a currency board and piggyback on someone who is actually trusted, because no one in the Zimbabwean scenario is trusted. And it would take 20, 40 years to build that trust. Why take 20, 40 years when you can just piggyback on the South Africans to do so? Remember, we're not joining the Rand Union. I know that politically there are many
Why
people who
not?
have.
Why not? Why not?
So the research I've done is that politically it's not something that ZANU-PF wants to hear. That there's strong aversion to us joining the Rand Union.
Is it
So
ZANU,
I'm being
is
practical.
ZANU-PF, is ZANU-PF, sorry to interrupt you. Is it ZANU-PF or it was Mugabe specifically who, when faced with the options, preferred to go for the US dollar rather than the Rand? Are you aware of that?
Yeah. So I'm out of my depth here. You know
Yeah.
better. I know that
I'm just saying
government.
that why, I mean, you as a technocrat, why wouldn't Zimbabwe join the Rand Union? And why wouldn't
It's
this novel proposal of yours? How can we get it effected? That confidence building move whereby the South African Reserve Bank becomes a custodian, as it did under de Kock. De Kock was the governor of the Reserve Bank
yeah. So
in the independence. Yeah.
okay.
Why
So
can't that be
Prof,
done
it's
now?
simple. Okay, it's a no-brainer why we should join the Rand Union. It's a no-brainer. The Rand Monetary Union. It's a no-brainer. We should. They're the biggest trading partner. There's a lot of reasons why we should join them. I know that people say that South Africa is going in a particular way, but they've managed their currency way better than everyone within Southern Africa. And if we still have the US dollar and we're within the Rand, then it means that ZIG will actually be stronger than the Rand itself. Remember, it also depends on our policies. So it's no brainer. So when I ask myself, because I'm a logical human being, I'm like, if it's a no brainer, why haven't we done it in the last 44
Yes.
years? And to
Yes.
me, it sounds like it's more because of the politics
So
and
can we go
issues
beyond
of
politics?
sovereignty.
Would
So,
you
and
are
I'm
you
saying,
are you
so I'm
prepared to make that
saying,
a
given,
strong recommendation? Are you prepared to make that a strong
yeah, that's a
recommendation?
no-brainer. But given the
Mm.
politics, I'm actually arguing that you don't need to join the Rand Union, but you need to place trust in our currency or our reserves with the South African Central Bank. And that's nothing unusual. Germany, for the longest, when they suffered after World War II, had their gold in Fort Knox. China keeps its gold abroad. Why? Because its own creditors are abroad. They want to know. Anyone who trades with Zimbabwe wants to know, is the gold actually there? They're not going to believe the RBZ. They're not, unfortunately. No matter how good a gentleman John is, unfortunately, they're not going to believe him. But suppose there's someone who wants to lend Zimbabwe. If they knew that the gold is actually with the South African Reserve Bank, and the South African Reserve Bank every month gives us an account and says, this is the amount of gold, this is the amount of Zim dollars that has been created, and this is, we're monitoring and we're ensuring that whatever is there has full fungibility. Then what you're doing is you're outsourcing the trust and confidence to somebody who actually has it. It's like an insurance or a guarantor, someone who actually has it. And then you then allow the confidence to build over time. So those are my restrictions. My restrictions are if we haven't joined the monetary union in 44 years, I am want to believe it's because it's political, because economically it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks. It's something to pursue, and I'll be coming back to you
Okay.
towards the end to see how you can frame that in the form of proposal, which goes into the field of public policy. I don't believe that there will be as much resistance to the idea of joining the Rand Union as it was. From what I heard, was single-handedly decided by Mugabe of going for the US dollar
Okay.
instead of the. Yeah, we'll come to that. Uh,
Okay.
but thanks, you have educated some of us too. Yeah? but we want you to follow through your observations in the form of strong recommendations. If you can just think about that, and we'll come towards the end. Janet,
Okay.
I hope you haven't fallen asleep. Janet, my question to you is really the question that always comes up: is that with all this pain and suffering, why haven't the masses reacted? What can you explain? Because in the end of the day, it's a public response that moves public policy. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks to Prof. Muganu, to Tinashe as well for those contributions. And as I was just sitting here listening to the history of it as well, Prof, in terms of where this all comes from, over 3 decades ago, we could even move it to the structural adjustment program time, the early 1990s, and Zimbabwe has been in this conundrum for really over 3 decades, if we put it that way. And to me, when we are trying to describe and to explain this challenge or this problem, the economic problem, I come to agree with identifying it as a wicked problem, which has no single solution to it. So it is very complex. And the problem is that we have viewed it as probably just a monetary problem as a country and as a government and as a people as well, probably to some extent. So we're always looking at it. We want to cure the issue of the currency, or we want to address the issue of the elections and the like. But it's a very complex, wicked problem that we have, and it is marked or characterized by lack of responsibility, what I would call organized irresponsibility at the highest level when we look at it. And when there is no responsibility, it comes with knee-jerk solutions that are not well thought out. And I was thinking, just taking the submissions by Prof. Muganu and also by Tinashe in terms of who are the players? Are they not seeing this? And to me, it's that organized irresponsibility that leaves the blurred lines that we see. And in the end, the paranoia that may result from even those citizens or the masses that you're talking about that may want to respond or to ask critical questions, accountability questions, ask questions about responsibility. Who is responsible for this crisis that we find ourselves in? And we will remember what happened. We just have the recent experiences of just pre-summit, the pre-Southern Heads of State and Government Summit, where we saw the civic space, the political space really closing out, not even shrinking at all. And those are always signals that will show you that people have this organized irresponsibility that celebrates impunity and nothing will happen. So it sends this signal to the citizens that if you try to do anything, you will go down and you'll be by yourself. So we see a decimated kind of civil society or movement or the masses that you are talking about. But these are also exactly the same people that suffer the consequences of lack of leadership. So when I look at it, the major drivers, really, if we go back to the early 1990s, when we read about the ESAP, what went through the Black Friday that was explained by Prof, the many knee-jerk policy interventions that we have seen that have actually costed the common citizen, what we see is that we have lack of leadership. We have no plan in place at the highest level, at the lowest of levels. We don't have an alternative. So sometimes you also need to ask yourselves, if the citizens or these masses were to try and hold accountable what is our alternative? What is it that we are driving as an alternative to what we are seeing, or the alternative to this current context that we have? And I just want to speak to it. And economists usually talk about the VUCA kind of economy or context that we have, but I wanted to spin it and start with describing it as very complex. And I think I've addressed this issue that the problems and the challenges we face are so interlinked, so interdependent, and very complex, because they are designs by human beings, by people that are in leadership, by people that are in the background. It's so complex to detangle these problems. So I would put that as the number one issue that really puts us in the position and in the quandary that we find ourselves in. It is complex to the point that when we try and address one issue, the next one arises. It has got so many heads that it has. And why? Because we are not going to the root causes in terms of what really is our problem. And for me, is the issue of addressing the leadership and the governance question. It is also unpredictable. And when you invited me to this space, I was just like, what an opportune time for me to be on this platform and talk about my own experience about the recent devaluation of the ZIG. I changed jobs recently. I was on some old mutual pension scheme some years back and started work, and they made a payment to me. And this payment was in ZIG because I started it when I was in ZIG, when it was still ZIG. And they gave me a payment in ZIG in my account. I traveled to South Africa. And whilst I was there, and I think the rate then was 14.5 or so. 3 nights I was in South Africa, and the news came that it had been devalued. I had not accessed it. I had no means of rescuing that resource or that money that came into my account. And I stand here as a victim of what the government has done in terms of its policies, in terms of its actions when it comes to responding to the crisis that we face, the multi-level crisis that we do face. So the citizens are at the loss when we look at this unpredictable economy that we have, caused once again by what I said is organized irresponsibility by our leadership. Then the volatility, I will not go much into that. But I also wanted to speak to the issue of how ambiguous this is. And to this, I just want to take, as Prof. and Tinashe were explaining, where this comes from. One says the politicians, the other says probably is the technocrats. And you, Prof, you are saying the masses, why is it they are not dealing with this? So the lines are really blurred in terms of, it's so ambiguous, the problems themselves and where the solution lie, and really understanding it is so ambiguous, and the lines are so blurred, you cannot place it in terms of what is going to happen next, what is going to be the cause of this issue, because the reactions that come are never really predictable, so to speak. So we really face a big challenge that I continue to ask myself as well, that where is the solution going to come from? Because at the moment, the citizens are scattered. They're in the survivalist mode. They're just trying to survive by the day. The space itself has shrunk a lot. And there's a lot of lies as well, if I may put it that way. I was just listening. There is a question that you asked around the summit costs. And this I remember and I share, because specifically I asked this question in a breakfast meeting to the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance. And because coming really from the debt movement and as a debt question, that are we not borrowing as we see this whole infrastructure and construction going on, development and construction going on. And he told the meeting that there was no debt, suppliers were paid up, and he said the only amount that they've used is to the tune of about 150 million. Just about 2 weeks later or a week later, I read somewhere it was saying we had blown out about 1.7 billion United States dollars in orders. And I ask myself, so where do we really get the information that is accurate, that is true, that will allow us to make decisions, even at our very micro level as individuals and as people, to make economic and financial decisions? You will not really find it. So that lack of responsibility, that lack of accountability really is very worrisome. And I am failing to really place in terms of where really is our solution going to come from. Because for me, there are no future prospects. For me, we are seeing the decrease in quality of life, and corruption will continue, and the illicit financial flows will continue, the pillaging of our resources will continue, unless we really come to a space of understanding maybe the political economy of the different convenings we have had, or dialogues that we have had, or that we are pushing for, and ask ourselves, why have they not worked? Where did we get to? What did we get out of them? And how do we move forward? I think a pause really at this point for me, for us to really take stock of that is probably one of the ways in which we really need to think about this. And I'm putting this, we at one point thought that maybe the high level debt dialogue platform was going to give us an opportunity to engage, even just for debt resolution, for reforms that we're talking about. And I think it's one of the contributions to the introduction of the ZIG, because if you look at the economic reforms, there's the whole issue of dealing with the currency crisis, and they brought in the ZIG. But we continued to participate in the high-level debt dialogue process, which now, because of the governance reform issues after the elections of 2023, what happened pre-summit, and what we continue to see in the context, it looks like it's another flop. So I'm always trying to think, so where are we going to really get this solution? How do we harness even the region in terms of coming together, in terms of solidarity that we need? But I think we need some psychological conversation when it comes to Zimbabweans and how they react or act at this point. I'm seeing the issue around being honest to ourselves as an example that someone is putting there. But the whole afternoon, I was like, I think we need to ask ourselves, do we really love this country? And what is it that we can give for this country for us to move forward? I think we need to tap into some psychological conversations because of what has happened in the past, what is happening, and how we're going to move forward as a whole, if we're going to resolve these challenges and these problems that we are facing. And to me, it's not the economy that we have to cure. It's not the currency that we have to cure. We need to dig deeper and go back to basic conversations about how do we govern, and how are we governed, and who is sitting where at a particular point in time, and do they really love this country for them to move forward this country? Because for me, I think as Zimbabweans, we stopped loving this country. Everyone is just fending for themselves, and we've become so individual in terms of our solutions. I'll stop there, Prof, and hand you the mic, but on a very sad note of saying, I honestly don't
very
know.
depressing, Janet. I've never heard you so depressed, and yet so poignant. I mean, the words you've used: organized irresponsibility, leadership deficit, repression, such as was experienced by civil society in the pre-summit era. These are very strong words. We have to add, of course, and I'd ask you, as one who's involved in the civic society, whether we have done a careful audit of our population. One of the reasons why we appear so immobilized, demoralized, is because we have, as I've always put on this platform, almost 80% of our professionals and skills are out of the country. We're everywhere, including the moon, as Zimbabweans. And that has taken off the steam on the system. It has depleted every sector of our society, including leadership, on both the ruling and opposition circles. We don't have the best of Zimbabweans in our polity. We don't have the best of Zimbabweans in the bureaucracy. We don't have the best of Zimbabweans in the private sector. So we're in a mess, no doubt about that. But before I leave you to rest after your very interesting but depressing submission, where are we now with the debt restructuring? I know you have been involved with that. Where do we stand?
So there hasn't been a convening of the platform, the meetings that the high level platform meetings that we were hosting since the elections. And there has been talk about having it sometime early October, but we're already in October, and there is no communication that has come in terms of whether this meeting is going to be convened for us to take stock of the matrices that we have, the three matrices that we have: the economic reforms, the governance reforms, and the land reform matrix. So it's also at a standstill, and conversations are whether there's still that goodwill and that interest. And that, for me, has really been lost, and a lot now just remains very questionable in terms of the commitment to those reforms. That's the reforms, especially the governance reforms and respect for human rights, is a major issue. The issue as well of dealing with corruption is a major issue as well. We have seen the scandals. We continue to see them. We continue even to celebrate them to some level. So that one is at a standstill. I'm not very certain that the creditors are interested in having this to participate in this in the dialogue, in the debt dialogue, structured debt dialogue process anymore. If they are, it's then long overdue for us to have another meeting where we are going to discuss. I know that the working groups themselves, the three working groups, have met here and there to discuss progress on each of the matrices. But that progress is very slow, I must put it. I think with what has also then happened with the currency, big blow as well when it comes to the economic reforms, the governance, I won't even talk about it. The issue around the land reform itself, when we don't have the resource we're talking about, we don't have the money right now. Where are we going to get this money, and whether we are moving the needle there is also at a very slow space. So I think it's a space that that has been knocked down by what is happening in the context, and we put it back to the government in terms of its commitment.
Thanks, Janet. We've had over 100 people participating on this platform this evening, and there've been comments here you have seen. I think we're moving now to the point where the last questioner, in other words, what's the way forward? How shall we conclude this discussion? And I want to come back to my panelists, beginning with Professor Ugano. What's the way forward? What are the recommendations that we must put in the public domain as our contribution to this crisis in terms of resolution thereof? Or how shall we proceed? Professor Ugano.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Janet, for that profound submission. I liked the way you put it in terms of how our system is disorganized. Prof, the question that you're asking is very important. We need dialogue. We need inclusive dialogue. The country is divided. You know, what is fun is, I don't know where we are failing. If you look at ZANU-PF tagline or a motto, it talks about unit, peace, and development. That's ZANU-PF. The President Mnangagwa, in recent statement, he said that we can only develop if we are unified state. So I don't know why it is difficult to put our words into action. And I'm saying ZANU-PF because that's the governing party. We need to unite. It's foolish to think that we can win economic war when we are divided. It's foolish to think that ZANU-PF can do it alone without the rest of the stakeholders in Zimbabwe. They can have so much arrogance if they want, but we've seen it during the government of national unity, that when there was a unit of purpose of all forces in the country, we had an average growth rate of 10.7% per year. In some instances, we're hitting around 80% growth rate. And the quality of life improved in those 5 years. Again, during the struggle, we read in the books of history that a united team of Zimbabwe won the war with the British. It was not ZANU-PF. It was Zimbabwe. We ZANU-PF is now hijacking and say we brought the independence. The country was not called ZANU-PF. The country was called Zimbabwe. But the ZANU-PF and ZAP were the instruments that were being used to mobilize people as a country. I like the Japanese, after the Second World War II, after the Hiroshima saga, they did not disarm the political machinery in terms of mobilization. They began on an economic mission to say we want to be known as the most powerful economy in the world. And they continued the same spirit of uniting themselves. So as long as we have not united as a people, we will not go anywhere. And the message I want to leave here is that the biggest adjudicator of our political disagreements in Zimbabwe is not Sadat, it's the economy. Where we are going with this economy, we cannot earn trust in government of ZANU-PF, which we have given a chance for 44 years, and they've messed up each moment. Even at a golden opportunity, which they got during the new dispensation, where they were trusted by Zimbabweans that I think they can make a U-turn and do things right, they failed. There's no any other opportunity which they can use to bring trust or to earn trust, except if we are united. So as far as I'm concerned, our leaders, we are all leaders, but our levels are different. We need to swallow our pride and do it for the poor. And I respect you, Professor Mandaza, because these meetings, you arrange them, and I see your passion that you have. It's not because you want anything out of it, I don't think so. But it's because you are doing it as part of your leadership. Because this country needs people who are torch bearers and light for the people who are in Chimanimani, who cannot say anything. If technocrats in government cannot stand against their principles and say this is wrong, how do you expect my grandmother in Chimanimani to stand against the government? Or to caution them, say what you are doing is wrong, not even being an activist, but just raising a voice. So we need to do it for the people who are in the rural areas, who are poor, for the young people who are being drowned in drugs, for the businesses which are closing and people are becoming unemployed. We need to take away our pride. Clearly, we can't say we are an educated nation when we can't see each other. And this is a challenge I'm giving to ZANU-PF leaders to say, how are you going to have international engagement if you can't engage locally? What is this they are doing? Cracking on the opposition, arresting opposition for flimsy charges. Why are we doing that? Clearly, this is barbaric. It must stop. Political detainees must be released. we need to talk with Zimbabweans. You know what is very fun, I'm stopping here, is that there's no shop for ZANU-PF. There's no hospital for ZANU-PF. When you are fit, you think things are okay. If you go to the hospital, I was in Paranyatwa, I went to see a relative there. I saw people sleeping on the floor. It's bad. But there's no one who come with a card and say, I'm a ZANU-PF supporter, and you will give a better treatment. We get the same treatment. The potholes, we go through the same potholes. When electricity is going out, it's for everyone. For opposition, for ZANU-PF, for everyone going to Zimbabwe, we struggle to pay tuition fee for our kids, all of us. So what are we earning out of our arrogance to hate each other? So we need to talk. Once we begin to talk and we unite, the same way we united when we're going to everybody struggle, then we win this issue called the currency crisis, the economic problem. Because we need to unite. 27 years in the doldrums of currency crisis. I think we need to smell the coffee. We must never call each other names. What happened, happened. But let's go back on the drawing table and talk. Otherwise, if we don't do that, I'm still confident the economy will bring the talks, because there's no way the ZANU-PF government can run this country where they've lost any imaginable little confidence which was available. It is lost. It's time to talk. Over to you, Prof.
Tinashe? Your last parting words in the form of recommendations, Tinashe? Are you still with us? Okay. Tinashe? Can Janet come in the meantime? What has happened? Tinashe? David?
We've lost connection with Janet. We only have Tinashe.
Tinashe? Okay, I think Tinashe said quite a lot in his presentation. You're there? Tinashe, come in. Tinashe. Is he there, David?
Yes,
David?
but he's still muted. He's there. Tinashe is there, but he's muted.
Yeah,
Oh,
Tinashe.
he's back.
Sorry, Prof.
You'd gone for a drink, huh? You're back.
No, I'm actually preparing for my birthday. Today's my birthday,
Oh, happy
so
birthday,
I'm
young
actually
man.
going out for dinner.
Happy birthday, my young man. Just your last,
Thank you so much.
your parting words in terms of recommendations, the way forward.
Okay, I think you know, with your question, I think we've well articulated the matter. That
Yes.
from my end, the technical bit, what we just need to do is to ensure that we realize that the World Bank framework for calculating money supply can, you know, people can get their way around it. You know, I think I gave a very simple, straightforward one, which, you know, you only include money supply. If a government IOU, you only include it in money supply if it's within a year. But unfortunately, if it's beyond a year, you can't include it within money supply. But we all know we've had, you know, circumstances of the condonation bill and all sorts. So there are ways in which tricks that Treasury or someone in government can do to work around that. So that's why I am insisting that we have a framework in which we measure money supply and we measure it properly. And then we, you know, to begin with, what went wrong, and then from there, the bigger issue is we either join the Rand Monetary Union or we have a currency board, but the reserves are with the South African Central Bank, Reserve Bank.
No, thanks, Tinashe.
All right.
Like
Thank you very much.
We'd like to put those thoughts on paper. And when you come back
Okay.
to Harare, I'll promise you a birthday lunch. Sazanederere. Okay, so Janet is gone, so I just want to conclude by saying the following. A fortnight ago, we had a special session here where we put on the table a proposal for a national transitional authority, which must begin with a national dialogue platform, NDP. That was received very well a fortnight ago. And we want to inform this panel and the panelists thereof in particular that we intend having them as part of that NDP, along with many other Zimbabweans at home and abroad in the diaspora. And we are planning a meeting which will put this, which will convene the national dialogue platform, and during which meeting we'll discuss the way forward in terms of a very concrete proposal, a transition authority, which to use Gift Mugano's words, would unite Zimbabweans and resolve and develop towards a comprehensive political settlement in Zimbabwe as a first step towards economic recovery and the blossom of our country. So I want to thank you for this follow-up session. It's very interesting conversation. As one of the commentators said, if we fix the politics, the economy will respond. I think we've reached a stage, what we have called, Tony Rilla and myself, the Lancaster House moment, where Zimbabweans simply have to sit down around the table. And I think it must begin, Gift, with a careful analysis of the factors around us. I think we talk too much about ZANU-PF. What is ZANU-PF? Who is ZANU-PF? What is the form and content of this so-called ZANU-PF? What is government? What is the form and content of government? We use overarching categories without defining them more closely. We need close analysis of the political economy of this country if we are going to get anywhere. And I think it must begin as scholars with a clear understanding of the political economy of Zimbabwe. And in doing so, as a basis for the steps forward. So I thank you again, all of you, Gift, Mugano, Janet, and Tinashe Mparabata. And Tinashe, enjoy your dinner and happy birthday. Thank you. David?
you.